All right, guys. So the University of Chicago had a so-called disinformation conference that is about how disinformation is supposed to be a threat to democracy, aka what the Democrats don't like is a threat to democracy. Information that they don't want you to believe or trust is a threat to democracy, according to the Democrats. Okay, information they don't approve of. Now, the speakers at this event were pretty notable, right? There were people like Barack Obama, some other woke academics. Brian Stelter was there as well too. And speaking of Brian Stelter, I mean, this video is mainly about him. He got destroyed because students were able to ask questions. And thank God we do have some college students in this country, believe it or not, that are actual critical thinkers, okay? And they ask questions that make you critically think. And that is what happened to Brian Stelter, who got destroyed by a college freshman whose name is Chris Phillips. Now, I want you guys to watch this exchange as this college freshman basically calls out CNN for being a biased news network and brings the receipts to the conversation as well. Take a look.
Hi, thank you for coming. My name is Christopher Phillips. I'm a first year at the college. My question is for Mr. Stelter. You've all spoken extensively about Fox News being a purveyor of disinformation, but CNN is right up there with them. They pushed the Russian collusion hoax. They pushed the Jussie Smollett hoax. They smeared Justice Kavanaugh as a rapist, and they also smeared Nick Sandmann as a white supremacist. And yes, they dismissed the Hunter Biden laptop affair as pure Russian disinformation. With mainstream corporate journalists becoming little more than apologists and cheerleaders for the regime, is it time to finally declare that the canon of journalistic ethics is dead or no longer operative? All the mistakes of the mainstream media, and CNN in particular, seem to magically all go in one direction. Are we expected to believe that this is all just some sort of random coincidence, or is there something else behind it?
It's too bad. It's time for lunch.
You have 30 seconds.
No, I mean, there's a clock that says 30 seconds. But I think my honest answer to you, and I'll come over and talk in more detail after this, is that I think you're describing a different channel than the one that I watch. But I understand that that is a popular right-wing narrative about CNN. I think it's important, when we talk about shared reality and democracy, all these networks, all these news outlets have to defend democracy. And when they screw up, admit it. But when Benjamin Hall, the Fox correspondent, was wounded in Ukraine, the news crews at CNN and the New York Times stopped what they were doing, and they tried to help. They tried to help him get out of the country. They tried to find the dead crew members. That's what news outlets do. That's how they actually do work together, to your question about sharing those kinds of connections and trust. We don't talk about it enough, though. We don't share that reality about how that happens. And with regards to the regime, I think you mean the President Biden. The last time I spoke with a Biden aide, we yelled at each other. So that's the reality of the news business that people don't see, that people don't hear. They imagine that it's a situation that simply is not. But I think your question, it speaks to the failure of journalism to show our work and show the reality of how our profession operates. We have a lot of work to do, I think.
Bruh, Brian Stelter is a sad, sad human being. Did this man really just try to use the death of a Fox News cameraman and journalist being injured over there in Ukraine as a way to deflect from the question of why in the world every single time CNN makes a big mistake on a news story, it always seems to go in the direction of the left, aka the Democrat Party? Did he really just use that event, okay, that tragic event, as a way to deflect? Because that college freshman never asked about that. That had nothing to do with what he asked about, right? Again, this guy is a swarmy, low-life person, right? He just is. But the substance of the question here was about, again, why in the world every single time there's a story, again, like the Russian collusion story, right? Russiagate. Why is CNN always on the side that benefits the Democrats? Okay, why is it every single time there's a story like that, they're always on the side that benefits the Democrats? And Brian Stelter, okay, he claims that, well, you know, that's just right-wing misinformation, okay? Calling us out on being wrong on stories and always siding with the Democrat Party, that's just right-wing stuff, right? That's just you know, that's in and of itself disinformation, right? Again, it's almost like they just don't want to have a conversation about it. And they never actually ever come out here and correct themselves on being wrong on certain stories, right? They just go out there, they be wrong, and they never bother to correct it or admit that they was wrong, okay? Like with Russiagate, right? They never admitted that, hey, you know, all this Russiagate stuff was bunk, right? The Steele dossier, all the other stuff. Yeah, that wasn't necessarily true. Trump's not a Manchurian candidate. He's not Putin's puppet. Okay, all this stuff didn't happen. He didn't collude with Russia to influence the outcome of the election in 2016. That didn't happen, right? But they're not going to come out here and say that they were wrong on that, even though they strongly implied that that is what happened throughout all of Trump's 4 years in order to delegitimize him as president. So what happens in this cycle is that they get it wrong in favor of the Democrat Party. And then they just move on to the next story, and then they get the next story wrong. And they push Democrat propaganda while doing so, okay? Like, for example, when it comes to this Florida law, the Parental Rights and Education Act, here's Brian Stelter falsely claiming that that bill is going to limit the rights of LGBTQ Americans. Take a look.
In the United States, we're seeing a theme of the midterm elections emerging. It's the way you can see a wave start to form far from shore before it breaks on the beach. The theme, the talking point on the right, is about protecting kids from the dangers of the Walt Disney Company. Really. But Disney is just a stand-in. It's just a symbol for something bigger. A conservative backlash to growing acceptance of gay and transgender people. A conservative fear that traditional beliefs are being trampled on. And there are entire networks that program to this fear, and many politicians that react to it. That's the story here. As this CNN.com reporting says, 3 months into the new year, lawmakers in dozens of states have introduced a slew of bills that could limit the rights of LGBTQ Americans. Some of those bills are framed as parental rights bills. Opponents say they're really actually anti-gay bills, and it's easy to picture this battle continuing right through the midterm elections. But for folks who aren't partisan warriors, this battle is incredibly disheartening.
Yeah, so that is CNN, again, falsely claiming that the parental rights bills would limit the rights of LGBTQ Americans. What they actually really mean is that they're going to limit the rights of LGBTQ kindergartners. And then at that point, I will ask you to define what is an LGBTQ kindergartner. Okay? Again, I love the framing here from CNN. Did you guys catch the one that said that parental rights is chipping away at gay rights? All right? Like what? Like again, they're literally trying to frame kids learning about sex and gender identity in kindergarten is some type of LGBTQ issue, right? It's an LGBTQ rights issue. I don't get it. I don't understand. But again, what he's doing here in a very slick way is he's pushing the disinformation that these bills from the GOP somehow limit the rights of LGBTQ Americans, and that's just not true. Okay? It's just not true. It's false. Right, but one story in particular that, you know, basically all the mainstream liberal media got wrong, that is really coming back to bite them in the butt after it's been confirmed by them. Remember, they confirmed their own stuff. Nobody else, no right-wing media outlets can confirm or be truthful, right? It's only truthful till they confirm it, is the Hunter Biden story. Again, which they all denied, and CNN openly said that it was Russian disinformation. They dismissed it. And some of the panelists at this event were actually asked about the Hunter Biden story in particular and the idea that censoring that story may have affected the outcome of the election in 2020. Take a look.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you for doing this. Really appreciate it. I'm Daniel Schmidt. I'm a freshman at the University of Chicago. My question is for Ms. Applebaum. So in 2020, you wrote, "Those who live outside the Fox News bubble do not, of course, need to learn any of the stuff about Hunter Biden," referring to his laptop, of course. A poll later after that found that if voters knew about the content of the laptop, 16% of Joe Biden voters would have acted differently. Now, of course, we know a few weeks ago, the New York Times confirmed that the content is real. Do you think the media acted inappropriately when they instantly dismissed Hunter Biden's laptop as Russian disinformation? And what can we learn from that in ensuring that what we label as disinformation is truly disinformation and not reality?
My problem with Hunter Biden's laptop is I think totally irrelevant. I mean, it's not whether it's disinformation or, I mean, I don't think the Hunter Biden's business relationships have anything to do with who should be president of the United States. So I don't find it to be interesting. I mean, that would be my problem with that as a major news story.
We're going to talk about more of this tomorrow in our first panel, so stand by. And I think we have run out of time.
We talk about A to C. They now think that if only the media had told us about the laptop at the time, as the kid yesterday was suggesting, which I don't buy his theory, that Trump would have won. But for the censoring of the New York Post, Trump would have won. And I think it's a preposterous counterfactual, but it's also it's impossible for me to refute. In the same way, I cannot refute that this bottle is keeping all the polar bears away. Right? Do you see any polar bears? Right? I cannot prove the negative. And this is just it has now become.
Can we lock the doors just in case?
It has been wrapped into a much larger narrative, and so when they hear disinformation, they say, "Oh, you mean like Hunter laptop," which actually turned out to be true?
Yeah. So you can't prove whether or not, if the Hunter Biden story wasn't dismissed as disinformation, if it was actually taken seriously by the mainstream liberal media, whether or not that actually would affect the outcome of the election, you can't really prove that. But hey, dude bought receipts to the conversation to suggest that, hey, 16% of Joe Biden voters may have acted differently if they had known about the Hunter Biden laptop story. And I love how that person, the panelist there, answered that question and tried to basically dismiss the story and say, well, it's just not a very interesting story because what Hunter Biden is doing doesn't, really have any effect on who should be president of the United States. And I'm just like, anybody that is saying that doesn't actually understand the Hunter Biden story. They don't understand what the accusations are in regards to what is on that laptop. Okay, we're talking about Hunter Biden potentially selling his father's influence to make money, right? To secure business deals. And these business deals potentially are involving kickbacks to Joe Biden if you go deep enough down the rabbit hole in terms of what some of the allegations are. Okay, and I would think that the son of the United States president and his business dealings overseas would kind of be a big deal that people need to know about, because the president himself may be compromised if he is tied to those business deals. Okay, that's what Tony Bobolinsky implied, what was going on. Okay, Joe is the big guy, 10% for the big guy, Joseph Biden. But again, you would know that if you actually paid attention to it. It's always either one or two things when it comes to the Hunter Biden story, right? At first, it was like, well, it's just Russian disinformation. Now that it's been proven that it's true, then they're saying, well, it's not important. What Hunter Biden is doing, it ain't all that important in regards to Joe Biden. And it's like, you can't say that if you actually read about what is on the laptop, right? If you read about the story, if you understand the story, there's no way you can come up here with a straight face and say that. Okay, if you truly looked into it, there is a strong reason to believe that Joe Biden, again, could be using his influence to get his son favorable business deals and getting kickbacks off of it. Again, look at what happened in Ukraine, right? I don't think it's a coincidence that Biden threatened to withhold taxpayer money from the Ukrainian government unless they fire a special prosecutor that was investigating Burisma, right? Which was the company that Hunter Biden was on the board of. Okay, a company that he knows nothing about, right? Why the hell is he on that board for? We all know why. But again, these people, they use their ignorance as a way to try to deflect and say, well, we shouldn't cover this story for this reason, that reason, right? It's not important. We don't need to talk about it. Even though it is clear that if anybody actually knew about the story, they definitely would say, hey, you know what? Maybe Joe Biden's compromised. Maybe he shouldn't be president when his son is involved in all these business dealings and potentially selling influence. Okay? That could potentially affect Biden's decision-making and the decisions he makes in the White House. Okay? So again, kudos to these college freshmen for asking questions that are difficult, that require critical thinking, and that don't go along with the left-wing narrative. All too often, college students are characterized as woke leftists, and I don't think that is always the case. There are college students out there that are, free thinkers, that are not necessarily woke college students that are drinking the liberal Kool-Aid without actually tasting the Kool-Aid that they're drinking. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.